parts of the Bill of Rights. I mean, he was really instrumental in doing lots of work on, and I think it was the amendment that created the Electoral College. He was the one that he was a major player in that whole thing. But his office, his original law office, is in Westminster.
Wow.
And basically, when he closed his law practice, he just gave it over to the state. And they didn't do anything with it for a long time. And then the family took it back over. But it is the exact same building with the exact same stuff that was in it in the 1830s.
Wow.
Which Mike finds hugely fascinating.
I do.
And you actually had pictures. We did a show about it.
We did a feed
long
on
time
it.
ago.
I think a while back.
Bob Haas came on, right?
And Bob Haas came on, and because it was one of his things, and he talked about it. But that's this weekend, and they're actually doing a fundraiser for Bob Haas for a project he was working on. He had a collection of I would say primitive firearms, but like flintlocks and things from the 1700s, and they have those at the Westminster Museum, and they're putting together a display. Sorry, I didn't mean to use that, but check that out this Saturday. That's another thing that it's a little known but interesting thing that you might want to see, especially if you've never been. It's a piece of history. The other thing that he was responsible for is switching the flag. They used to have a stripe for every state, and so they stopped when they got to 15 or 16 because you can imagine what it would be like now. So they went back to 13. But that flag, the 15-star flag, flew over Fort. What was it? The Star Spangled Banner. Was
Sumter?
You got me.
Was it Fort Sumter?
No, Fort McHenry, wasn't it?
McHenry?
Yeah,
something where they
composed the Star Spangled Banner.
Fort McHenry.
There's a replica of that flag down
Knew
there.
I should have listened better in history class.
Totally. All of us. Well, not him. He's on it.
He's
All
on
right.
it. We digress, however.
I digress. Anyway, but check all that stuff out. It's real interesting.
That's what's interesting about history, is to see how the Electoral College is now functioning now, where it started and where it is now. I think that's fascinating.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I agree.
But Leslie.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome in studio.
Thank you. It's great. Very impressive, actually, to see the technology and the effectiveness of your work. Yeah. From
the bar is down here.
Wouldn't know. It's good for me.
So you wrapped up in what, May?
Mid-May. Yep. The session ended mid-May with the passing of our budget, the state budget, which is the very last thing that is done, and that gets sent on to the governor. We ended up with about an $8.3 billion budget, which includes ARPA funds, of course.
Yeah.
Our usual budget is in the $7 billion, so there's an extra billion, and there's some in reserve for upcoming years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing amount of money, and I think a lot of it was well spent, I hope.
And you got to be, so did you, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, did you start out the session Zoom and then went in person, or was there a whole session in person this year?
Well, for the first year, the entire first year of the 2 years was on Zoom. The second year, we did the first 2 weeks on Zoom and then moved into a hybrid. So those people that felt comfortable started coming into committee, but the session in the chamber was in person. Or in Zoom, I don't even remember. It's like a blur.
Because I did find a picture. I found a picture on your website that you were actually in the State House, and I was going to ask you how that felt after, because you started. You didn't have that. You didn't have that. Yeah, you didn't have that experience. So how was that?
It was actually strange for me because, once again, I had never been in the State House,
Yeah.
and people were avoiding each other. So it wasn't necessarily community because we didn't want to breathe on each other. So there was a little bit of sort of what I would call scurrying around to try and avoid. We'd go to the cafeteria, get food, go back to our committees rooms, where we felt people were spread out. The Sergeant at Arms. Her first name is Janet, and I'm blocking on her last name, was fantastic in organizing the State House, and it was like, sit here, don't sit here, sit here, very clear on where our 6 feet would be. We did have some cases, but very few, astoundingly few, because people were respectful of the rules.
Nice.
Yeah, it was good. It was good to be in person for me. because everyone talks about how important relationships are when we do this work. And of course, I didn't know it from the first year. The second year, I began to get a little bit of a view of that. There was, when I cared about a bill, I understood why it was how to talk to people, and that's what I was learning.
I imagine like the classic water cooler chats
Exactly.
are where a lot of the work happens.
Exactly. Yeah.
So $8 billion when you're working with a budget that big, do those numbers just become like ugh?
Well,
or does it because you get into minutia?
Yeah, so they're money committees and they're policy committees, and I was on a policy committee, healthcare. So we don't really get into the money at all. So I didn't have that except for the bills that I care about. So for example, there was one bill, S285, which has to do with healthcare transformation, and there was a budget request of $5 million. That's really the only money I was dealing. There was other money with other bills, but this was the one I cared about. So, was sort of advocating for that policy with the money committees. In this case, it was appropriations. So I would talk to them. So what appropriations does is they take all the requests from all the 11 committees and put it together into a budget. And they decide what they think has value and what has less value, because it has to be weighted because you can't do everything. And it ends up that the appropriations committee is the committee. That's where the power kind of the purse is. And also what's demonstrated about what we care about. Philosophically, where do you put your money? Do you put it in healthcare? Do you put it in housing? Do you put it in corrections? There's just so many different places that have requests. So ultimately, that committee allocates money to what we care about from the policy point of view.
And would you say that's just such an interesting perspective, because you can state things in policy, but unless it's backed up by the appropriations committee, it's not really what we care about.
Right. Whenever there's funding with it, if we don't fund it, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Totally, it has to be in the budget.
Wow.
We have an opportunity to revise the budget. This was, of course, new learning for me, called the Budget Adjustment Act, and that happens at the beginning of every year. So they look at the budget. So it starts July 1st, the new budget. So then in January, we look at the budget we passed. What did we miss? What do we need to add? What can be readjusted? So that happens right away with the current budget. And
that's good.
Right after that's done is the next budget.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Shocking.
So just generally, without going into too much detail, what would you say Vermont cares about? When you look at the budget and when you've seen where the money has flowed, what comes out to you?
Well, I will just say that something like $99 million was put into workforce development. We put a huge amount into workforce across the whole workforce. It was in trades. It was in nursing, particularly because of our nursing workforce shortage, bad thing. And there are a lot of reasons for that. So that had to be really broken down into detail. Surprisingly, what we learned, and this part of it came out of healthcare, was there aren't enough nursing faculty. Why isn't there enough nursing faculty? Because they don't get paid enough. So that nurses rather work clinically than teach. Because of the salary disparity is huge. So putting in forgivable loans and salary supports. There's some interesting programs, I think it's at Copley Hospital up north, where they're taking people that already work there and try to upskill them. So you might take a nurse's aide and support them so that they can become an RN. It's a fantastic
wow, that's
program.
a great idea.
Fantastic program. So how to spread that throughout the state. So looking at what's working across the state in that kind of thing, and then funding it.
That's great, because why start, somebody totally novice, right, versus someone that kind of knows a little bit about the system. I would say in the end, it's probably a lot less education.
Yeah, because, they come in with the vocabulary.
Right,
you don't
right.
need to start from scratch. So it's a really good program. That was one of my favorites. The nursing faculty thing was great. It was a lot of support for VTC and then there's this whole simulation lab for nurses. There's a whole lot of different places where we wanted to support that workforce. So that was cool. What else? Climate. A lot of money going into that. Sort of in Vermont, our biggest contribution to global climate change is transportation, which is trying to move from fossil fuel to electric vehicles and getting that done, and then our heating systems.
Yes.
So weatherization is huge. I love weatherization because it doesn't, change a lot except support people who don't have
Right.
sort of tight housing. So it adds less carbon to the air. It reduces their costs. So programs like that in the climate world.
What about housing?
Yeah, housing. Housing is so complicated.
It is. It's like this big catch-22 situation that we have here in the state.
Yeah. I mean, there's some bills, and every committee goes into each bill in this total depth. So my arena is healthcare. So the housing bills there were many, and they were complex, and I don't even know necessarily which ended up out. The governor vetoed some, and how that affected things is a little bit unclear. To me, the goal, of course, is to make more housing available, to support landlords and bringing more housing online, to support upgrading the housing, to support renters, so both, to support renters and renters and landlords. Yeah.
Well, and that ties back to the workforce problem again, too, because you hear a lot of the workforce issues are around people can't afford housing to live here,
to come here,
to work here.
Or to even find housing.
Or find it.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible, yeah. And supporting the trades, I think, is huge. And there's a lot of money in here in supporting trades. There is the education. There's a whole bunch of education. One of the things I really care about, it's not huge, but it's looking how we fund our technical centers, because right now the system, it's a system problem, which I think is designed not to have kids go into the technical centers. I think the technical center is great. My son actually went through a program there. So I think that needs to be figured out, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
We need to be kind of, I think I was reading the front of your website, and one of the things was resilience.
Yeah.
And I think in order for us to be, as a state, resilient, we have to look at it, getting more trades, because there's a lot of history, and you look around a lot of the small towns, and you drive through, and there are these mom and pop plumbers and electricians and whatever, and they're not necessarily having the family
next generation
to hand it down to.
Yeah.
And we lose all of those trades, and we don't get the houses built. We don't, all that. So it's how do you juggle, figure, you guys have your work cut out for you up there.
It's really complex.
I was just thinking about it as you were talking about it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard. And, we make little bites and move forward. I hope the technical centers really get robust. I think they need to. I think everyone somehow should come out with a real plan for the future. I hope that happens. The problem now is the money follows the student, so that at the high schools it's not necessarily to their advantage to have kids go to the technical centers, because then they lose money at the home school. So it's this conflict, and that's why that needs to be really resolved.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
That does make sense. I wasn't quite sure what you
I
were
just wanted
referring
to
with
clarify.
the system.
It's a systemic
yeah.
design problem, and that needs to be fixed. I'm hoping it gets fixed. I know there's a study group, and that
Nice.
people complain about the study groups that come out of the legislature. I think there was some article,
really?
maybe somewhere or other. But you can't know what to do if you don't understand the problem.
Yeah, you need the information.
You need the information. You need to go deep. Yeah. That's a great example of that.
Yeah. Are you on any study groups now? Or?
No, because it's an off season. The study groups generally happen
during the
in the off session, particularly, but not during. This is sort of campaign season now, so we don't know who's going to get reelected, or a lot of people have retired, which you may have heard of.
I didn't happen to hear that.
Yeah.
But there's a huge shakeup anyway because of Leahy leaving.
That's right.
I mean, it's just like that one pin came out, and now
Everything's
everybody's moving.
Yeah, particularly in the Senate.
Yeah.
The Senate's going to look really different. The House is going to look very different because of, I think, something like 8 out of 11 chairs have retired.
Wow.
That's huge because it's institutional memory, it's knowledge. That means all younger people are going to move up. Now, some of its institutional memory will be lost, but what will be gained would be vibrancy and
maybe
new
different
ideas.
way of looking at things.
New opportunity. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of new opportunity coming up.
Locally, there's an issue around reappropriation or reapportionment.
Apportionment,
Yes.
right.
Get the word right.
Yeah, it's long.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. As who's representing whom is changing,
Yeah, right. So just a quick overview. Every 10 years we have a census, and in the Vermont Constitution it says that we have 150 people in the House. So what happens is every 10 years we take the census from Vermont, and it's somewhere around 620,000, divide by 150, and that determines what one representative represents. It turns out that this year is about 4,100 people. So they had to look around and make sure that that balance is intact. Well, what happened between 2010 and 2020, Rockingham lost 18% of the population. Wow.
That's a
big number.
Yeah.
So I asked one of our select board members, what happened, and his thought was that a lot of big houses had families, but the families have moved on, so now there's only one person in the house.
Yeah.
So some of that. There's probably other reasons too, but anyway, that's one of them. So then what had to happen is it starts with a Secretary of State Reapportionment Board. They do an examination, and then it goes to House committees called Government Operations. And what they did is have to redesign the representation. So what happened was, and what was then adopted by the House and the Senate, and the governor signed it, is Rockingham, which used to be with Athens, Grafton, Brookline, Windham, shifted to the south. So now Rockingham is with Westminster and Brookline. So just 3 towns rather than 5. The other towns went with Chester. So Chester, Athens, Grafton, and Windham. So for Rockingham now, there's still 2 representatives, which I'm happy about, because the original plan, and it went through our Board of Civil Authority, was going to be 1 person, 1 town, 1 town, 1 representative. So what they did was they took Rockingham, and in order to get the right number, we have something like about 5,900 residents, I guess. So for the 41 that they had to carve out some people. So what they did was carve out Saxon's River. Right? So all of Rockingham, and then Saxon's River was matched with Westminster. So that didn't seem right for our town. Saxon's River is a real, part of Rockingham. So luckily, and I was happy, House Government Operations created the new district of all of Rockingham, all of Westminster, and Brookline with 2 representatives. So right now we have a primary going on. We're in primary season. I'm running in the primary as a Democrat. Michelle Boslun, who is now currently representing Westminster along with Putney and Dummerston. So that's a little domino.
I was going to say it's like a shell game.
Yeah, exactly. A little dominoes going on here. So Michelle Boslun is also a Democrat, and she is also running to represent Westminster, Rockingham, and Brookline. We do not have at this point a primary challenge, but there is a challenge in the general. So there'll be 2 Democrats in the general, 2 Republicans in the general, and then there could be independents or other people step up. That's where we stand at this point. Is that logical? Does that make sense?
It does. I have to kind of.
We almost should get a graphic and
I know.
get the map.
The map is actually quite interesting. It is available.
We'll have to look at that. I'm hoping that you'll come back at some point
Anytime.
and talk about that and introduce us to your other representative.
Happy to. I think she does really good work. She's very passionate and caring. Yeah, if I could say, I think our work sort of is on 2 levels. Our first part is constituent work, and really connecting constituents with trying to solve problems, doing the research, sending them to advocates or state government, and other legislators who are experts. And then our second work is the policy work, which we've talked about. So those are the 2 balances. I think Michelle is really strong in caring for her constituents.
And I can speak, we're down to just about 2 minutes. I can speak to the constituent work, having reached out to you about some things, and then Leslie was very responsive. So just to speak to that, there's power behind, you put your money where your mouth is, I should say, that you're saying that, and then I can say that it's true.
Yeah.
That you're doing that, and that's very helpful.
Thank you. I try. I'm not always as successful as I wish. I wanted to do a lot more to help, support your work.
You got the ball rolling.
Thank
you.
You
got me starting in the connection. And a lot of it's just you have to connect to this person and then this person and then this person. That's sometimes just with government. That's the way it works.
Yeah. Constant conversation. Yeah.
So we have about a minute and a half left. Is there anything any points we didn't get to talk about today that you would like to talk about, or are you doing any of your constituent meetings online?
Haven't decided about that. We'll be going door to door for sure. I sort of enjoy the one-on-one or whatever, having conversations. I hope people will be in touch with me, and just keep talking. I hope people vote. I think it's crucial that we step up, particularly in November. I care a lot about the Reproductive Liberty Amendment. There are two amendments to the Vermont Constitution that we're going to be voting on in November. One is amending, it's called Proposition 2, sort of removing the word slavery from our Constitution, and the second is reproductive liberty, and I think it's crucial given the times that we're in. And I'm proud of Vermont. I'm proud to be a Vermonter. I'm proud of the state legislature, and I hope people step up to vote for that.
Yeah. Vote is your voice.
That's
right?
the only way.
Vote's your voice, right?
Exactly.
That's not the slogan.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, again,
another
it's
show has
gone
flown
by
by.
really
Whoa,
fast.
it's like
Did well for your first
I
time.
love that. Thank you guys. You're great.
Well, thanks, Leslie. I hope you will come back and we can talk some more this summer about what's happening and what you see in the future.
Absolutely.
But that's it for today. See you later,
See you
Fellas
next
Falls, and bye for the feed.
Bye.
Local news, politics, business, sports, arts, music. My